recording. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for
This
having
is
me.
our third episode now of Emergent Conversations. Oh, forgot to grab these. Yeah, so basically I like to do these, one, to get to know the educators, and also to kind of like, our whole theme has been uplifting early learning. So we feel like this is a good way to kind of uplift early learning and just get to know some cool educators like yourself.
For sure.
This is Nzinga, one of our educators at our downtown location. Do you want to just start by introducing yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name is Nzinga. I work at Hilltop Downtown. I am in Robin Classroom, which is young toddlers, 1 and 2-year-olds, originally from California.
That's right. What part of California?
Oakland by way of Berkeley. So
Okay,
my
yeah.
parents are from Berkeley,
Nice.
but I was born and raised in Oakland.
Yeah, I've been there many times. I used to have family in Oakland.
Nice.
They've since moved all over the place. Some of them are like Sacramento now, all over
Yeah.
kind of the Bay Area. But I love Oakland a lot. Berkeley was really cool.
Yeah.
I'm originally from Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, California.
Yeah.
How do you like Seattle?
I love it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Berkeley, actually.
Yeah.
So it feels very much like home.
It's funny because like people who come from California usually don't like Seattle, I feel.
Really?
Yeah, I've encountered that a lot, and I love it. Same thing. I think it doesn't remind me a lot of Los Angeles, but it's kind of the opposite of what I grew up with that I didn't like. You know what I mean? Like I like it because it's like all the bad stuff I try to get away from is not here.
Right.
You know, and I really
Yeah.
like that. It's really cool. I like I don't know, there's like a real sense of community here that I didn't really have in LA. Outside of like your immediate family, everybody else is a stranger and everybody else is kind of not welcome. And here it's kind of the opposite. I really like that. So
yeah, I feel like I lucked out at Hilltop because I really feel seen. I feel heard.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a family outside of.
hey, I'm glad to hear.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, same. I feel like, so I used to work for Seattle Public Schools before I came here.
What grades?
I was 1 through 5 or K through 5.
Okay.
And I was doing an after school program there as well, and I loved it, but like, yeah, I didn't have that like sense of community of like working at a place, and I loved my coworkers and stuff, but it was just kind of, 8 to 4, and then I didn't see them until the next day. And Hilltop does have a nice kind of close-knit community that I really like too. I feel like people genuinely like each other here, which is
For sure.
which is cool.
Yeah.
And nobody really leaves. I think outside of maybe some people here or there for different things like big life events, nobody really leaves.
Or they come back.
Yeah, that's true. It's always good to make sure you don't burn any bridges. But no, I love Hilltop, and I guess for you kind of were at Queen Anne first for a little bit until you got some clearance here, and then now you're downtown, and I feel like downtown's a really special center, and I really hate that we're not going to be a part of it anymore. But like, can you speak a little bit about maybe your experience downtown versus Queen Anne?
Sure. I think the uniqueness of downtown is, one, the community is very small, which is great because you get a lot of time with family members, but also with children. And the actual architecture, it's a very beautiful space.
Yeah.
The way that the playground surrounds the
I love that, yeah.
classrooms. And everything is sheltered, and there's cover. The one thing I'm not big on, which is ironic, is the rain, right?
Yeah.
Being from California, I've never really liked, let's go play out in the rain. And we did that at Queen Anne. I was like,
Oh yeah.
this is weird.
At Fremont, it's even more so. They're
walking in rain.
Rain or shine, and even sometimes in the hail. I'm like, guys, don't go out in the hail. I'm like, we'll take shelter until it passes, and then. But no, at Fremont, they love getting outside, and that was another kind of big culture shock for me too. I'm like, it's raining, but like it rains every day. So.
So the space is just beautiful. I really, even some of the structures like the changing station, which is, you spend a lot of time at the changing station. Ours is dope because there is a stairs that like hide underneath that you can pull out, which are really fun.
That's nice. I wonder if we made that.
No,
that was already here.
Misha said it was from here.
We should steal it. GSA for watching. We're not going to steal it. Just kidding.
Misha was like, "This is amazing," and he said it was from here.
Yeah, Misha's great. He's I always tell Darlene, because he's only part-time, I'm like, we have to get him full-time because he's such an amazing craftsman.
Yeah.
Like, I know he takes his time sometimes and it's a little bit slower than anticipated, but it's because it's so like well crafted. Yeah.
Also, He's a former educator, and when he's working in the classroom, he includes the children.
Oh, yeah,
It
I've
is
seen that.
so beautiful to watch. It's amazing.
And I love how much you trust them. I've seen children go on ladders. I've seen them use saws and hammers, and it's like, but he's good at scaffolding it. Yeah, and it makes for great documentation when you show a parent a picture of a kid with like a hammer. And they're like, oh, we built this amazing bookshelf or something. No, I love Misha. And yeah, he's a former educator, so he's pretty versed working with children.
And I feel like where we're headed, all of us relocating to Queen Anne, there's a lot of things that need to be put in place. So Misha's going to have...
I told him to make a list.
That's a full-time job now.
I told him to make a list, and he already did. And it's like, I'm a little pessimistic at our timeline for construction here, but cross our fingers. It's funny because now that we're kind of switching to this newer concept of some of the stuff that we took from New Zealand, it's really awesome, but the facility that we are in downtown would be perfect for that model.
Yes, it would.
Because it's very open,
So let me tell you what I did today. We ate lunch outside on the playground.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I'm trying to incorporate outside. We're going to do a provocation later where we do worm painting with spaghetti and paint, and we're going to do it outside.
That's awesome. Because, I wish we, our biggest center was downtown. We could stay here because, you could totally just open up the doors and have this kind of back and forth and eat outside and I would love that. The Raven classroom is doing it now.
Oh, really? Because their door to the classroom is right there. So they have an in and out right now where kids can just go outdoors whenever they feel like and come back in whenever they feel like.
I should check in with Sadia to see how she's liking it because I feel like if we're starting to do it here and people are catching on already, I feel like we should have some sort of exchange program of come learn from it here and then take it back to Queen Anne.
Oh, that'd be great.
Right? I feel like we should do something like that. I've always wanted to do exchange between sites just to give people different perspectives. I feel like sometimes we get stuck in our comfort, and it's I'm used to this because I'm only here, but I feel like if you just ventured out a little bit, you could see that things are done differently sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think it's really good to take inspiration from other teachers to see what possibilities are with your classroom or even just your age group too.
Who would you say are some of the people that you've taken some stuff from, some educators that inspire you?
Oh my gosh, Andy is, man, I cannot sing her praises enough.
She's amazing.
She really is amazing. Just the small noticings that she does with our young infants is pretty brilliant. I think we have they're about 7-8 months right now, and they're sitting up at the table, and I really asked her how was that process for you? And she said it's feeding them close to the table, letting them explore the table, the chairs, and it's just it seemed like such a seamless transition for them from eating on the floor or taking a bottle to the table and chairs. It's really beautiful.
That's awesome. Andy's a wonderful educator. She's one of the ones that just her presence too is so calming and relaxed, and I don't think I've ever heard her raise her voice.
Nope.
But I love that a lot of the times when we go to kind of these bigger agencies that need deliverables from us, I'm thinking about NIAC or NACI. We had a big kind of discussion with them around cribs, and they were very adamant that we needed cribs, and we're like, but why? And they could never give us a real good answer. It was just because that's the requirement. And then we kind of showed them Andy with the mats, and that's something that she brought over last year. And it was children need a place to sleep. They don't necessarily have to have a crib. And, so long as you're very careful and you're honoring their space when they're on the ground. And they've recently been like, okay, you guys can do that. And they haven't pushed back, and now we're leaving an AC program here. But I do like that we're starting to kind of push back a little bit, and some of these kind of bigger agencies are starting to see there's different ways of doing things.
And the more information as years progress, there should be progress. There should be changes and adaptations made, especially from people who are actually with children on a daily basis and have decades of experience.
Oh yeah, I think that's one of the biggest issues kind of in our country, right? Is there's these very systemic approaches to things, and it's those people who are kind of running the systems that have nothing, they don't really have that experience on a day-to-day level, so they don't really know, but they're kind of just stuck in the system, and then we all gotta get stuck in it too, which is why I'm excited about bringing new stuff next year. I know that was one of the conversations we had at our PD day of like, how are we going to change things? And I think it's just pushing back and just showing them the kind of the worth and the value of things. I think eventually it'll make sense to them, and it'll be hard to kind of ignore.
Right.
What brought you to Hilltop when you came to Seattle? Of all the different early learning centers, why did you come to Hilltop?
What's so funny is I wish I could say I did my research. Hilltop is the best, even though they are. I probably interviewed around 8 or 9 different, I did a lot of interviews. And what kept me coming back to Hilltop was, first off, I was really trusting my heart. I have a background as a journalism major, and I've done so many different things. And when I first walked into the space at Queen Anne, after interviewing, I think I was kind of halfway through my interviews at that point, I went, this feels right. This feels like a place where children are having fun, where I want to be. It just, when I did a tour with Johnny, and she was just kind of walking me around, and she said, and they're here and here and here, and it just felt good, and I wanted to be somewhere that just felt good, and so I just followed that intuition. And then my interview with Darlene was so fun. When I came here for my second interview with Teresa later told me, she said, I thought you guys were friends because you hugged each other and you were laughing, and it's just that kind of connection you can't ignore. And it just felt right. I just listened to my heart, and I said, I think this is where I want to be. And you know what was so funny? I interviewed at another place, and they sent me, like, we want you. And Darlene happened to call me that morning. And I said, Darlene, because I interviewed here for admin.
That's right, yeah, for an office
yes.
assistant. Yeah.
And I said, Darlene, I think I actually want to be in the classroom. And I kept saying in my mind, I said, what I want, yes, I want Hilltop, but I want to be in the classroom. I don't want admin. And I said, my perfect world will be Hilltop in the classroom. And that ended up being the conversation that we had, and it just worked out.
I'm glad it worked out that way, because we don't really do, I know that, like, as admin people, we're kind of just seen sometimes as admin, but, like, it's rare that you see, especially at Hilltop, and then working with Darlene, it's rare that you see someone just do admin and not work with children.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of glad that you got to do that, because I think as an admin person, you need that perspective of being in the classroom. And I think sometimes people forget of, like, we were all in the classrooms once. Yeah. So I'm glad that it went that way too. I mean, I remember Darlene did speak very highly after your interview, and she was like, we really need her. I think she would be great. She talked about your background in journalism, and we talked about how we were going to revive the podcast, and how you were somebody that we were thinking about maybe kind of co-hosting or facilitating some sort of kind of media project. And, like, she was like, we should really, really get her. And I was like, well, you're the one that's sending her an offer. Make it worth her while, I guess. But I'm glad it worked out for us.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been great. I just trusted my intuition. When it comes down to it, at the end of the day, you just know where you should be.
That's usually what you should do. Just go with your gut. And you're usually not too wrong. Can you talk a little bit about your background in journalism? And
Sure.
I'm excited. I went to school for theater, so I have a kind of a performance-based.
So I have my master's in acting.
Oh, did you really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to get an MFA, but I just got distracted and I never went back to school for it. But that's awesome.
Yeah. So let's talk journalism first.
Yeah.
I went to San Francisco State, BECA, which is broadcast, electronic communication and arts department, and it was a great program at the time. It was like almost #1 in the country, and I was like, it's right in my neighborhood, let's make it happen. And I learned a lot there, but my hands-on experience was actually at youth radio.
Ooh, okay.
I was in Berkeley walking from one job to the next, and I kept seeing this sign say youth radio, and something was like, go inside, knock on the door, what is this? And I walked in, and it was a training program for young people. Your first day there, you're on the radio. You're
That's
out
awesome.
in the street with a microphone, asking people questions and just getting real world experience. And from that moment, I was hooked. And it's young people teaching young people. So young people go through the program, they're in high school, and then they turn around and they're mentors to other high school students who come into the program. Oh, it was so fun. We got pizza on Fridays. The show was Friday, so we would do all this prep work, writing, choosing our music at that time. You chose your music. You would DJ a show. You would do commentaries. It was so fun.
That sounds so fun.
It was amazing.
I used to host a college radio show for a little bit. So yeah, I have a little bit.
What was the focus?
It was sports. It was mainly sports on our campus. At the time, our school was, I went to UC San Diego, which is a big acting school as well. And we weren't very good at sports at the time. Now they're like Division I and they're amazing. But yeah, so I would cover some of the like more kind of obscure sports. Like I did a bocce ball thing once, and I was always trying to include humor in it because I always thought it was kind of silly just to be a bocce ball broadcaster. But yeah, I have a similar experience in radio, and that I fell in love with it too. I loved being kind of the facilitator of like what everybody's listening to. That's awesome.
Yeah, one of my claims to fame is that I broke the story, meaning I was the first person to report on it in the country. Identity theft for young people. So I worked at a cable company. It was my first job, TCI Cable, and I was a courtesy caller. That just meant I was going to be cursed out at some point.
Yeah.
Because I would call people and say, hey, this is me at 14, your cable's about to be cut off. You haven't paid your bill in several months. And the responses were crazy. But the sad thing about it was I couldn't transfer them to pay the bill. They couldn't pay the bill over the phone. They basically had to wait. Basically, like it was a guy's coming to your house today to cut your cable. You can stop him now or that's it. There wasn't much of a solution that I could give them, which was kind of built into the problem of my job, right? People were so frustrated with me.
And you're like, you're not really here to help me, you're just kind of here to tell me
what's about to happen. But I brought that up because there were multiple times where I would call and I would have the name on the account and it would end up being a child. So parents were actually taking their child's information because they had bad credit, etc., and using it and opening accounts with it.
I think that's definitely an epidemic that happens because especially so I'm a junior. A lot of I've heard about it. It didn't happen to myself. But I do know of a lot of people who, you know, mom opened up a credit card under daughter's name, and then later on when they're 18, it's like, wait, what? I don't own an RV that I'm aware of.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
And I understand why it happens, right? But it's very unfortunate for that child when they go out into the real world and want to get their first credit card and they can't.
I actually had the opposite experience where my mother took out a credit card in my name after I kind of ruined my credit. This was like, you know, a couple of years ago, a long time ago now. And I didn't know about it. And then later on, she let me know, and she actually improved my credit. And she was like, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to go and, you know, spend the limit and ruin your card.
Wow.
And I was like, well, it's my card. I should have it. So she gave it to me, and sure enough, I ruined my credit again. And I should have just let her manage it. But
that was sweet.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, and she didn't do it for any other reason other than just to help fix my credit.
Yeah.
You know?
Amazing.
That's interesting. How can you foresee any kind of like intersectionality between journalism and early learning? I'm always big on like sharing your passions with like what you do, and like how do you mix those two together?
That's a good question, because what's so funny is I'm an auditory learner, and so when I've come back into the classroom after being gone for several years, I realize how much things are very visually based. And I've been trying to find ways in which I can bring more media into early learning. And I know there is a way. I have not delved too deeply into it, but even just recording devices, right? When I heard my voice for the first time, isn't it bizarre?
It's so bizarre.
When you
you never hear yourself the way you actually sound either.
Yes, you don't. And it's this, I sound like that?
Oh, yeah.
You got to take an import moment. And the first response is, I don't like my voice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Apparently there's some sort of science behind it, because when you speak, your voice will always sound deeper to you just because of your ears are closer to your mouth.
My voice is the deepest ever. And I'm like, oh, wow.
It's because your mouth is so close to your ears that it just sounds deeper. But then when you listen into it back on a recording thing, it's like, wait, what? I don't sound like that. My voice is that high. I thought it was deeper. But but I
really think it's important for images to be reflected back and a child's image to be reflected back to themselves, as well as like the voice. So we do right now, we do a lot of singing, we do a lot of movement and dance, and a lot of, I want to say 3 out of 5 of my students, I only have 5, I'm very lucky, are probably auditorial, which means if a loud noise goes by, they're like, loud! And I'm like, oh, you're an auditory learner, right? So I think there are opportunities to incorporate children in broadcasting together.
I agree. I think, we're doing this now, right? I do think that, like, for me, one of the things that attracted me to Hilltop was kind of their value of documentation. And like I we do documentation in a very linear way, and it's very kind of like, here's a photo, here's a caption, where it's like there's so many other ways. We could set up a podcast and have kids chime in, or we can record live stream for a day or something, right? I feel there's so many different things we can explore, and
fun stuff. Jenny, she was doing a presentation on stories, learning stories specifically, and she said she filmed herself as a teacher because she was getting really frustrated during nap time. And Andy was a co-teacher in that. I think it was Andy in Geneva. And she just, partly it was a requirement for her degree, but she wanted to really see what she was going through in that moment. Yeah. And to just hear her talk about how the camera reflected back to her a lot of things, it was just a real eye-opening moment for me. So
it reminds me of kind of the reason behind a lot of mirrors in a classroom. It's just kind of like this constant self-awareness and this constant self-reflection of like, that's what I look like when I'm sad or I'm happy. And similar, I think, if you're a teacher and you don't really have somebody looking at you, and then you hardly ever look at yourself when you're in that in a classroom. So I think that's a great idea.
One of the things now that like, as I said, I had a lot of careers and jobs before this. I'm also a mindset coach. Long story there. But one of the things that I was thinking I wanted to do, like with ideas of how to incorporate this, is affirmations playing while they're sleeping, because right now they're primed for programming, right? Their subconscious mind is really taking over right now. From 0 to 7 is when your subconscious and unconscious mind is in control, and they're being programmed, like their beliefs, their limiting beliefs, their feelings, emotions are all kind of being set in right now. So while they're sleeping, even during the day, having positive affirmations being said to them and them taking it in, I think could be very, very powerful for them.
I agree. It's kind of like rewiring, right? It's we used to have a child that was with us. They're no longer in our program, but they had some very kind of serious, challenging behaviors, and it all kind of stemmed from their parents were going through a separation at the time, and there was a lot of kind of just verbal kind of back and forth between the parents that they were very aware of, and it was a lot of just negative self-talk that they would hear. You're dumb, you're ugly, and they would say that to themselves. And we got into the routine of every time they did something, or every time they they reflected that way about themselves, we would just say, no, you're smart, you're very smart. And they would be like, I'm smart, and they just started kind of parroting that back, and it just became literally this rewiring of, I went from I'm dumb to I'm smart, and then yes, no, I can do it. And it was like so powerful that this kind of like very simple thing was just like so profound. And we did talk to the parents of like, just so you know, they come home and they repeat some of the stuff that maybe you guys are saying to each other. And mom got very, very, very upset in a sad way, and she was, I can't believe that she is actually listening to us. And I'm like, they're sponges, and and it does set in, and it does give them this kind of wiring that it programs them into their future. And
so NPR had a study done, and it was an insane study, but it stood out to me. They had parents go into the room, and they recorded this of their child sleeping, and they would speak gibberish, so not even real words, and they would pretend to be happy, and they hooked like these electrodes onto the child's head, and they were like measuring like their heart rate and how they were responding emotionally. And with the happy while they're sleeping with the happy gibberish. They were happy, like they would just have an elevated state of emotion, and then they would go in, parents would go in while the child was sleeping and do like angry gibberish, and they would have a negative response to that. So
That's
even just gibberish.
Sounds like it's a lot of kind of just tone
Babies pick
and
up on it.
sound and that is interesting. I think, I would love to explore more of the auditory kind of stuff in a classroom. And I like the idea of just kind of positive affirmations playing in the background, or just kind of that stuff, like what's going to stick, and what's going to program you in a positive way. Can you talk about, I know you said you've had many different careers, but now that you're an educator, can you talk about maybe why this is a path that you chose to go down?
Yes. So, I'm in the part of my life where I'm ready to be a mom, and we're doing family planning actively right now. And I have also been programmed to be really good at the things that I do, and I like to be really good. And I felt it had been so long since I had just been around children, so long since I had just observed. I knew that there were learnings that I needed. I knew that a lot of the early learning that I had when I was first in early childhood education could be outdated. Like there's some things that definitely we're still using, but things were outdated, and I just wanted to have another perspective, and having the anti-racist, anti-bias lens in the equation was just so appealing to me. And I just thought that it would make me much better as a parent and as a human in general.
Yeah, so that's so noble. I feel like that's such a great reason to want to go down this path. It's like an internship before you're a mother. It's great. It is. I love it. I will say too, now that you're a part of Hilltop, one of the great benefits that it has is the benefit for parents. They get a substantial discount. So just so you know, FYI.
That's good to know.
Especially considering childcare is so expensive. It is so expensive. One of the things that we learned in New Zealand, which people always ask, why New Zealand and why? Because their government funds their early learning, and they fund childcare, and they fund preschool. And you hear about Seattle now really pushing for universal preschool, but in New Zealand, this entire country does it, and they honor education from birth to college. That's their whole thing. And it's like, I really appreciate that, but that's kind of our biggest obstacle. So it's like, how do we incorporate it? Well, we could incorporate some ideas, but I think at the end of the day, it's really just being advocates for change in terms of policy and stuff like that, because
I think one of the most important things we could do as a country is to invest in early childhood education. It has been proven that the human who has gone to preschool versus the human who is not entirely different.
Not only that, but you're getting kind of a head start, which I know head start in itself, it's a whole thing, but like you really are getting this kind of opportunity to start something sooner than others. So by the time you're in kindergarten, you've already learned kind of some of the more things that you need just to be able to function in a kindergarten classroom, right? How to ask to go to the restroom, how to know where things are, how to kind of manage your own feelings in a way that's going to be safe. And that's one of the things I always tell parents of, especially now after COVID, everybody's kind of like very, very pessimistic about sending their children to school, because they're like, they didn't really have a years to socialize because of COVID, and now you're asking me to throw them into this giant school with hundreds of children. So they're like, we're going to skip kindergarten for another year. And I always say, yes, that's great if you could do that, but all you're doing is just kind of setting them back a couple of more years, because they're going to have to go eventually, and then it's going to be their first day when they're 6 rather than their first day when they're 4. And it's
that social emotional learning, I think, is just so key to it all.
I think for me, one of the things that, like, when I started, so I used to teach in California, and it was social emotional learning wasn't really a thing, and I think maybe it was just the time. I think now it's probably a big push, because I think most schools are doing it, but it wasn't until I came to Seattle that I learned about mindfulness and having these meta moments where you see yourself outside of yourself, and that to me was like, wow, they're learning this in school, where I feel like the schools that we grew up going to was very just, literacy based, and making sure you're reading at, the level you're supposed to be. And, I feel like math was always one of those that they always kind of moved the finish line for you. They were like, okay, well, you're not there yet, but you can take algebra when you're in college if you need to, or algebra, if you're in middle school. But yeah, I do appreciate that social emotional learning has become very embedded in, one, the values of Seattle, but most importantly in the curriculum in schools. So I think that's awesome. I think we're almost out of time. And Nzinga, anything you want to share before we sign off, or anything you want to make sure people know about you, or anything you want to talk about?
Sheesh. That's a good... Oh, there was one thing I wanted to share, because I saw it on here about a success story.
Yeah.
One, I think every day is a success, right? Because there are just small wins that you have. There's so many beautiful moments that happen, whether it's a child laughing or they learn to put their coat in the cubby. Like, that's a huge, huge win.
Yeah.
But there was one day, it wasn't at Hilltop, but there was one day I was teaching musical theater actually to 3-year-olds, and it was so fun. And I told my kids, it was a summer program, I told my kids, you can do anything in my classroom as long as we get through this, anything goes. And so we had just a really fun group of children at that time. And there was a young girl, I would make a request, and the first thing out of her mouth was, no! And I was like, whoa, what was that? And then we'd keep going, and I'd make another request, and it was, no! And I turned to her and I said, You've told me no all day. And it was probably about 10, not that it was all day. And she said, no, I haven't. And I said, you have. I said, what's going on? And we kind of kept going, and I checked in with myself, and I said, what is different today than any other day? And I went, we haven't done circle time. I love circle time. I love me some circle time. And so we would have this fake microphone that we would pass around. So I was like, we haven't done circle time. Everybody, we're stopping. Let's circle time right now. And it's one of those things, you got to just trust that gut, that intuition. A lot of times I just go on, okay, I'm doing worms right now. Pachi was like, Nick, who started the podcast, I think, at Hilltop.
Shout out Nick Jonas,
Toddlers and Worms. I was just following my intuition. So I was like, hey, we're doing circle time right now. Let's get in a circle. We go around, and it gets to the girl who has been telling me no for everything I've suggested. And the prompt was, what's happened from last night to this morning that's different or new that you have to tell me? So I learned with working with young people, especially as they become more and more audible and have more and more words, everything is important. And if I don't give them their moment, their mic drop moment, we won't be able to get on to the next thing. And she went, my cat died last night. And she started bawling. And I went, okay, well, we got to it. What do I do? And one kid after the other jumped in and said, that's like when my pet bird died. And then the other kid was like, we had a pet squirrel that died. I said, you had a pet squirrel that died? And they just all surrounded her with so much love and acknowledgement and empathy. It was such a beautiful moment that I was a part of, but not really. It was really them holding space for their friend, their classmate, and it was such an amazing moment. So I just wanted to...
that's beautiful. It's like, it's not a child moment or adult moment, it's a human moment that a child facilitated. I think that's great. I love when children have these like very big moments of relatability with each other. That's how I feel, like, even when I'm doing comedy, or it's just to find those moments of like, oh, you relate to this, and it's like, it's such a very like human experience that I just want to tap into more, and like, what else do you relate with? What else resonates with you? And I feel like grief and loss, all humans resonate with that, Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks, Nzinga. I would love to have you on again. So stay tuned for another invitation.
Thanks so much, Alfonso.